It is 11 p.m. in Las Vegas, 9 in Damascus, and 4 on a Thursday afternoon here in Seoul. I'm Moon Gun-young. This is ARIRANG Korea's only global network. Now, North Korea has finally replied to South Korea's proposal for talks on laying the groundwork for reunion of families separated during the Korean War, and the answer is a no. For details, we have ARIRANG News Unification Ministry correspondent Hwang on the line. Sung-hee, so a final response from Pyongyang 3 days after Seoul's proposal.
That's right, Tanya. The response, unfortunately, was a no. In a statement addressed to South Korea's Unification Ministry, North Korea rejected Seoul's proposal to hold working-level talks this Friday, which is, of course, tomorrow, on resuming reunions for families separated during the Korean War. The offer by the South was made on Monday following President Park Geun-hye's New Year's speech, where she expressed hopes to hold the humanitarian event sometime during the Lunar New Year holiday. The North said that there has been no change in South Korea's warlike posture and added that for a successful round of inter-Korean humanitarian exchange to take place, the right atmosphere must be created. It went on to say that it would not feel comfortable holding family reunions while Seoul is planning an all-out large-scale military exercise. This, the North is referring to the annual joint military drills between Seoul and Washington, which usually takes place through February to March. Pyongyang also said that in order for the two Koreas to discuss the matter of family reunions, they must talk about issues raised by the North, which is believed to be the resumption of South Korean tours to the Mount Kumgang resort. It said that if Seoul is willing to accept Pyongyang's proposal to discuss such matters, the two sides could meet for talks at a better season. Kanyang?
All right, Sung-hee, so how is the South Korean government reacting to this latest response from Pyongyang?
Well, South Korea's Unification Ministry expressed regrets over the North's rejection of talks and said humanitarian issues should be dealt separately from the annual military exercises. The ministry also said that it still upholds its stance that family reunions should not be linked to issues raised by the North. Once again, that is the issue of resuming South Korean tours to the Mount Kumgang resort. If you remember last year, the two Koreas were very close to holding a round of family reunions until the North called it off at the last minute. One of the reasons for the sudden cancellation then was believed to be South Korea's refusal to discuss the reopening of the Mount Kumgang resort. The Unification Ministry called on North Korea to accept Seoul's proposal for talks on resuming family reunions and added that it should show its sincerity in mending ties through action and not just through words. Back to you.
All right, that was our Hwang Sang-hee live from the Unification Ministry in Seoul. Thank you, Sang-hee, for that. Now, shifting our focus, Korea's central bank has left its key interest rate unchanged at 2.5% for the 8th straight month in January, citing improving economic conditions at home and abroad. The central bank has also kept its growth forecast of 3.8% for this year. ARIRANG's Ji-hye has the details.
Some economists have been betting on a rate cut this month, but that did not happen. Following its monthly monetary policy meeting on Thursday, the central bank kept its key interest rate steady at 2.5% for the 8th straight month. The bank said the local and global economies are showing clearer signs of recovery. It added that the Korean economy is very close to reaching its potential growth rate of nearly 4%, offering a growth outlook of 3.8% for this year and 4% for next year.
If the government works on improving its structural productivity by easing regulations, for example, the local economy will be able to achieve a growth rate of nearly 4%.
Despite the recovery momentum, the bank revised down the nation's inflation rate estimate for this year to 2.3%, down 0.2 percentage points from its October forecast.
The nation's low inflation rate stems from prices for international oil, commodities, and domestic agricultural goods that are stabilizing.
The central bank board's unanimous decision to hold the key rates, however, came amid concerns of a rapid strengthening of the Korean won against the Japanese currency and lingering uncertainty stemming from the U.S. Federal Reserve's decision last month to scale back its bond buying program. The weak yen, which lost a fifth of its value against the won last year, is a major concern among policymakers as it erodes the price competitiveness of Korean exporters against their Japanese rivals. Hwang, ARIRANG News.
Now, Seoul shares fell to their lowest close in 4 months on Thursday as investors offloaded contracts on an options expiry day, while some stayed on the sideline ahead of U.S. non-farm payroll data on Friday. At the closing bell, the benchmark Kospi was down nearly 0.7% at 1946, which is its lowest close since September 4th. The tech-heavy Kosdaq finished the day nearly 0.4% higher, while on the foreign exchange counter, the Korean currency closed stronger against the greenback at 1,063 won. The Korean government is aiming to lure more foreign direct investment to boost the economy and is promising a better climate for investment in quality of life improvements. Kim Min-ji reports.
The Korean government on Thursday unveiled a set of measures to draw more foreign direct investment to the nation in a bid to spur economic growth by boosting production and creating jobs. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy's blueprint includes a relaxation of regulations on foreign investment and incentives to encourage global companies to set up their headquarters in Korea. First, the government plans to ease and clarify foreign investment regulations. Many economists have pointed out that one of the biggest obstacles to foreign investment in Korea is the maze of confusing regulations on overseas investors. The government also plans to encourage global enterprises to establish regional headquarters and research and development centers in Korea. For all foreign employees at the headquarters, the government will fix the income tax rate at 17% and extend their visa status to a maximum of 5 years. The blueprint also includes a series of incentives for foreign investors, including quality of life improvements. Finally, the government also plans to map out strategies to attract more foreign investment in the future. Although Korea has seen the amount of foreign direct investment jump in recent years, the country is still far behind other global players. In 2012, foreign direct investment in Korea came to $147 billion, far below the U.S., which had $3.9 trillion, and Britain at $1.3 trillion. In addition, Korea's foreign direct investment in terms of GDP is the lowest in the OECD. FDI accounted for just 12.7% of GDP in 2012. That puts Korea second to last among the 34 OECD countries and far below top-ranking countries such as Luxembourg, Ireland, and Britain. But with the newly announced plan, Korea is now aiming to become one of the world's top 10 investment destinations in the coming years. Kim Min-ji, ARIRANG News.
With PC sales declining and the smartphone market saturated, chip giants like Intel and Qualcomm are moving on to the next tech trends, wearable tech and the Internet of Things. Well, our UDN reports on their latest innovations.
It's no longer cutting-edge smartphones, but wearable technology that's generating all the buzz at this year's Consumer Electronics Show. Intel, the world's largest chip maker, which has been slow to adapt its processor for smartphones and tablets, took the leap into wearable computing. It unveiled a chip designed for wearables that is called the Edison. The chip is essentially a tiny computer and includes a dual-core CPU, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and even has its own app store. By integrating the chip, clothing and gadget makers will be able to expand their wearable product lines. In addition to the chip, Intel also unveiled its own wearable gadgets. One is a set of smart earbuds that can play music and take the wearer's heartbeat. The other is a onesie that's actually a baby monitor capable of detecting a baby's movement, body temperature, and breathing. Now, another chip giant, Qualcomm, is making a similar move to shift gears away from its forte of creating platforms for smartphones. Its new Qualcomm Internet processor is geared toward the so-called Internet of Things, a network of everyday objects that are connected to the Internet. The platform will essentially be used to share data on home security, energy, and family health from various devices at home. By 2020, the number of Internet-connected devices is expected to expand to 26 billion and wearable devices to over 370 million units, according to research from Gartner. So it's no surprise these chip giants are venturing into what are now considered niche markets that appear to have vast potential for future applications. Yurian, ARIRANG News.
Korea's ratio of research and development spending to gross domestic product ranks as one of the highest in the world. But is it producing a big enough result compared to the size of the investment? Well, for a closer look at this issue, we're joined live in the studio by Dr. Kim Byung-ju, head of KLP Consulting and our regular commentator on this program. Good afternoon to you, Dr. Kim.
Good afternoon.
Now, Korea's R&D spending is one of the world's highest, and of course, Korea is also a global leader in patent registration.
Right.
Now, but we hear that this R&D drive is not really producing meaningful results in terms of job creation and new business ventures. So what is going on?
Right. Such complaint has been always around, and we have some interesting numbers prepared. Let's bring it up on the screen here, and let's talk about those. Overall, the chart that we have, the blue line right there on this at the top is what you're talking about. The 4.03%. That's the overall expended R&D expenditure divided by GDP size, and Korea is world's number 2 after Israel. Israel is 4.4%. So the gap between number 1 and number 2 Korea is not that big. Indeed, Korea, it just blue line shows Korea puts a lot of money into its GDP, into R&D, considering its relative size of GDP right there. And the red line right there is the absolute amount of money. And as you can see, the latest number you see is about like close to 50 trillion won. And that's a lot of money that goes into that. And the bottom, the yellow line, is the one that's causing a lot of concerns. And that awareness has been around in Korea for a long time. And the commercialization of these R&D efforts, whether they are being done enough or not, the growth rate of that is not as robust as the growth rate of the spending you can see if you do some math right there. And even there was a drop between 2010 and 2011. So indeed, as before, people are saying we're not producing as much results considering how much input we put into in terms of R&D efforts. So, I'm sure this discussion will continue for some time.
Now, let's try to put the things into perspective by comparing Korea to other countries.
Right. Indeed. We have a next, bar chart that's ready to tell us that story. Basically, what's happening is I don't totally buy these numbers at face value because this is from Money Today, and there are details and specifics that are missing, reference points and all that. But I think this statistics is about year 2011, and overall, how much of these are getting into, in terms of like a success into commercialization itself, and 20% is the number that's given to Korea as compared to all these high numbers that you can see in the world's leading R&D power here. Some people say, like, if we consider, for instance, the meaningful and very commercially promising patents, for instance, Korea is only about 14% of the world's leading players. So indeed, there are these numbers and other numbers that seem to show, once again, and that seem to highlight once again the point that comparing with the input side, the output side of R&D itself is not very satisfying.
So why is it? Why is it that Korea is suffering from this problem?
There are several answers, but one of the key answers is those people who are in R&D, they seem to be much more preoccupied by publishing, meaning that publishing their R&D results in scientific and academic journals. And that's happening because a big chunk of Korea's top brain in terms of scientific R&D are concentrated in the public R&D centers rather than private sector side R&D centers. Of course, you can imagine those people, scientists working in private sector, meaning Samsung and other corporations, they'll be much more focused on commercially promising technologies. But the thing is, since we have so many people, there, according to Money Today estimates, about like 60% of Korea's masters and PhDs in science R&D related field are actually at public R&D centers, and then 80% of PhDs in science relating to R&D activities are also affiliated with public R&D centers. So that just provides an environment where they can totally focus on publishing their R&D results rather than trying to find their R&D targets that have commercial potentials.
And this is not an issue, a problem that the government is not aware of. It is. And
Right.
so what is being done at the government level?
Interesting thing is since last fall, the Ministry of Future and Creation actually has been developing several kinds of different performance indicators for this scientific research. And what they've been saying is they are introducing details about these performance indicators of R&D activities here in Korea that will highlight not only just the scientific achievement, but also the technical achievement, as well as economic achievement, social, as well as infrastructure-related achievements and impact. So they're broadening their scope of performance measurements of these R&D activities, so that these R&D scientists will not totally focus on just publishing their results. And when you publish more, you have a greater chance to move on to the academia and becoming university professors. So trying to lessen or reduce the incentive on that side, and then expand more incentive on the contribution side and commercial impact side. So the future ministry is definitely working on that. However, I think we need more time in terms of its results and success.
Now, one concern on that front is that if there's too much commercialization, too much focus on commercialization,
Right.
then the fundamental research may lose ground. And if I remember correctly, this is something that the presidential candidates themselves debated on TV.
Right, indeed. Last year, when they had presidential debates several times, not once, both candidate Park and candidate Moon share the same thoughts that they should introduce policies that will allow these scientists to focus more on fundamental scientific research and reducing pressure on the side of commercializing these technologies and so on. And of course, that belief is correct. Indeed, we gotta assign a certain amount of resources to that fundamental research. But however, though, if you allow all the scientists to engage in free R&D activities, this is what's happening. What's happening here in Korea is just focusing on the research results that will be published, and then they will help them move on to the academia. So indeed, I think with these numbers that we dealt with today, once again proved the potentials and possibilities of moral hazard in scientific research community. So despite what the presidential candidates have mentioned in their debates, still I think we are being reminded once again, just like scientists are just like other human beings, we need an incentive system where we need tough performance measurements that will ask them for their accountability in terms of what they do. So once again, just like anything in life, balance is important.
Balance, very difficult one to achieve. Easily said, but very difficult.
Absolutely.
All right, Dr. Kim Byung-ju, thank you so much for today. We'll talk to you tomorrow.
Okay.
With rapid changes in the global economy, up-to-date business and financial news has never been more essential. See what's making markets tick around the globe. We speak to the experts and cover the biggest financial stories.
North Korea provocation.
Quite good. We received a lot of positive feedback, especially from those of
President Park Geun-hye's first overseas trip of the new year will take her to India and Switzerland. The Korean leader embarks on a 9-day tour of the two nations next Wednesday. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Jin-ju has the details.
The creative economy will be the key theme of President Park's trip to India and Switzerland. The concept encourages collaboration between creative ideas and the science and technology sector to produce new growth engines for the economy. In India, President Park is scheduled to hold bilateral talks with Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, and the two are expected to discuss cooperation in the sectors of security, trade and investment, and most importantly, science and information communications technology, the key parts of a creative economy. Further cooperation in this field with India, a huge market with a population of 1.2 billion, is expected to give a boost to President Park's vision for a creative economy, which is one of the major goals of her 3-year economic reform plan unveiled earlier this week. In the Swiss capital of Bern, President Park will hold a bilateral summit with President of the Swiss Confederation, Didier Burkhalter, and the two are expected to seek ways to expand cooperation in various fields, especially science and technology and vocational training, sectors that are strengths for the European country. President Park's trip marks the first state visit by a Korean president to Switzerland. During her stay in that country, she will also attend the World Economic Forum in Davos and give a keynote speech on the creative economy and entrepreneurship. The presidential office of China says President Park plans to introduce her economic reform plan, which centers around the creative economy, and promote Korea's economic and investment environment to bring more foreign businesses to the country. Oh Jin-ju, ARIRANG News.
China and Japan's diplomatic row over Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's visit to the controversial Yasukuni War Shrine is entering a new phase. While Beijing is using all diplomatic channels to whip up global condemnation of Abe's visit, Tokyo is in full-on defense mode, issuing explanations to world leaders where it can. Our Han Da-eun tells us more.
What started out as bickering between China and Japan over Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's visit to the Yasukuni Shrine is quickly morphing into a high-level diplomatic war of words. The shrine is highly controversial as it honors several Class A war criminals, as well as scores of those found guilty of lesser crimes. Chinese diplomats are using all possible channels to ensure the world knows full well that Abe's visit was unacceptable, while Japanese officials are busy justifying Abe's move whenever they have a chance to sit down with world leaders. China's ambassador to the U.S., Cui Tiankai, during a press hearing, criticized Abe, saying he should take full responsibility for the deterioration of China-Japan relations, while the ambassador to Canada, Zhang Junsai, also condemned the visit during an interview with a local media outlet. Chinese ambassador to Britain, Liu Xiaoming, went even further. In a letter published in Britain's Daily Telegraph, Liu compared Abe's visit to an evil wizard of the Harry Potter series, saying, "If militarism is like the haunting Voldemort of Japan, the Yasukuni Shrine in Tokyo is a kind of Horcrux, representing the darkest parts of that nation's soul." Japan is mounting a strong defense to China's diplomatic offensive. Japan's Foreign Minister Fumio Kishida, during a trip to Europe earlier this week, told his Spanish counterpart that Abe visited the shrine to console the nation's war dead, as well as to make a pledge that Japan will never trigger a war again. Although Tokyo's #1 ally, the U.S., has already expressed its disappointment, Japanese diplomats are busy attempting to soothe ties with Washington. Against such a backdrop, Japan's director nominee of the newly established National Security Council, Shotaro Yachi's visit to Washington next week is gaining more attention than it might have done before. Experts say China and Japan's row has the potential to become even more emotionally charged as the two nations' foreign policies are based on strong nationalism. And this, they say, would further escalate already heightened tensions in Northeast Asia. Han Da-eun, ARIRANG News.
The bitter cold weather in the U.S. has turned streets into ice rinks and kept residents shivering under the record-breaking temperatures. But it looks like some relief is in sight. Officials say temperatures are expected to get back to normal by Friday. Our Connie Lee has more.
Forecasters say the worst of the polar vortex that's descended on the United States is now over. According to AccuWeather, the bitter cold that affected around 240 million people in the U.S. is expected to ease up by the end of the week. But the mercury levels now are still below average in most U.S. states, about 10 degrees lower than normal.
You gotta dress warm, put your hat, sweater on it, double pants, good shoes.
The bitter cold is still a challenge for people in New York City, especially the thousands who commute by public transportation and those who work outdoors.
We're working a lot, every day 12 hours, so it's really cold being all day outside. It's freezing.
I'm staying with 2 support on heater and I'm surviving. But that was not enough for this cold.
On Wednesday, sheets of ice could be seen in several U.S. cities as the frigid temperatures caused water mains and pipes to burst. A water main break in Pennsylvania left vehicles stuck in thick ice, and another one in Georgia sent water shooting into the air. The blast of Arctic air that hit the U.S. early this week brought record-low temperatures to the Midwest and along the East Coast, grounding at least 10,000 flights, cutting power to tens of thousands of homes, and causing at least 9 deaths across the nation. Connie Lee, ARIRANG News.
It is a cold and dry day here in Seoul, but here now is a look at the weather conditions in your neck of the woods. And that brings us to the end of this newscast, but stay tuned to Arirang. We have a lot more coming your way on Early Edition at 6.